Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming Mercury retrograde season in the sign of Aries, which starts at the 1st of April and lasts until the 24th of April. Now, when I say 24th of April, until Mercury actually gets out of shadow, it will take much longer than that, so well into May. But officially, it kind of ends on the 24th of April. And also, this is not going to be our usual and average Mercury retrograde season. It is going to have a very special intensity and also emphasis. And at the same time, it's really going to be very, very quick. And, the typical expressions of a Mercury retrograde, like blockage, let's redo something, or let's keep something, for example, an idea or a project or what a solution that we need to come up, we need to invent, let's say. Usually we kind of keep it within ourselves and refine it and go back and forth over it until we get an end result which is more or less perfect. This is where that is included, but we will not have the time to stay with the ideas. This is where it's going to be changing from 1 second to the other, so it might even drive us crazy a little bit in that sense. And this is also where what we can expect from others. Even that is very, very, very changeable and not very stable under this Mercury retrograde. And why? Well, just as we ourselves personally are influenced by this very fast and quick changing energy, like opinions, perspective, visions, thoughts, uh, how we view something, all of that can change from 1 second to the other. This moment we hold one type of truth. In 5 minutes, something changes, a communication, an information, an observation we make, and everything changes. So, this is actually what we can expect. And just as this plays out for us individually, this will play out the same way in other people's lives and inner beings, outer being, whatever. So, you can imagine that this is where there's a certain kind of instability, like a roller coaster ride. And this can make Mercury retrograde season, this particular one, highly uncomfortable, especially that it's very fast paced. So there is no time really to, for example, someone angers you. That can very well be part of Mercury retrograde, a usual one, because words, misunderstandings, miscommunication. You go home, you sit with it and process it. This is where you might not have the comfort or the luxury to go home and process it. This is where very, very fast your reaction may need to be there very quickly. This is where a reaction might not be optional. Sometimes it's optional, you shut up or you contain it. Other times, if all of this plays out in legal setup, like a contract, court of justice, lawyer, legally binding decision, etc., you won't have that time. So, long story short, expect this roller coaster ride. At the same time, uh, Aries energy and Mercury meeting Aries, so Mars' sister, goddess of discord, 3 times. First, of course, Mercury met Aries when it was in shadow before it went retrograde. So let me look that up. It was on the 26th of March. So that was the first time when Mercury got this rebellious energy that I need to speak my truth or I need to initiate communication for the sake of clarifying things that are very important to me, Aries energy, the self, regardless of which area of life. So that might have started an inner process. Then Mercury retrograde is going to be meeting, and I'll show you this in just a little bit, Aries for the second time on the 9th of April. So, which means on the 8th of April eclipse moment, it is going to be very tightly conjunct Aries anyway. So you can imagine how Mercury and Mercury retrograde going back, redoing, or splitting something, an idea, a discussion, an agreement, terms and conditions mutually. Like, for example, what you see playing out on the world stage in wars. Even if both sides want, for example, peace, ceasefire, etc., Mercury is the devil here. Terms and conditions here splitting, not accepting. That's, of course, also South Node in Libra, absolutely, and North Node in Aries, absolutely. But Mercury is in the same sign as the North Node. So Mercury is definitely one of the tools for this. And the eclipse. So whatever the eclipse triggers for us, it can come through a mercurial way. News, communication, the opportunity of travel. When I say travel, well, you can imagine that travels might be sudden, unexpected. This is where you go to bed one night with no concrete plans. When you wake up in the morning on your phone messages, etc., you're already traveling and you didn't even know. So something sudden. And whatever happens in those travels, Mercury retrograde moments, of course, but don't necessarily think of the worst part. You know what I mean? Because many times coincidences, randomnesses, weirdnesses actually are fated and get us in. So those elements can very well lead you to something very relevant. The eclipse, the fate can play out through a mercurial way. Who knows what happens? And we must not forget that this is a total solar eclipse of solar, which means new moon, new beginning, whatever crisis or whatever is eclipsed. So it's almost like plugging out an electronic device. You power it down, you eclipse it, and then putting it back into the um, power source, and that restarts it. You know, when your usually Wi-Fi router, stuff like that, starts playing up, the very first thing that we are advised to do is exactly that, eclipse it. Take it out, leave it for a couple of moments until the electricity purges out, and then reboot it. That's how we can understand a solar eclipse. At the moment of the reboot, something new is coming, an energy of new. Now, of course, that may be that may take shape and form specific to your own personal life, but something new is coming, both individually and collectively. And where I want to get with this is that Mercury is going to be definitely one of the tools of this eclipse. So, again, this adds to the specific of the Mercury retrograde season. It's going to be a bumpy ride and also like a roller coaster ride, up and down, back and forth. And this is where also the typical confusion of the Mercury retrograde, of a general Mercury retrograde season, that doesn't even matter which sign in, but like generally, they're like, what did he mean? What did she mean? And then you think about it, and then you start processing it. Well, in this specific Mercury retrograde season, this is where it doesn't come through as, how should I say, lightly as that. This is where, when what does he or she say might be actually like a confrontation, where you don't think about it, you don't process it, you ask the person in their face, okay, but what do you mean by this? And you can very well understand how this can get heated, conflictual, verbal battles, very, very powerful, fated karmic confrontations, one-on-one discussions, contradictory, or problem solving anyway, to set a direction, Aries. So we must prepare for this. On the other hand, the Aries energy is very instinctual. It rules our deepest instincts. For example, if it's the first breath, then survival instinct. You may say, well, isn't that Scorpio? A part of that energy is, of course, and function is ruled by Scorpio, but how it is expressed, well, that is more Aries. When it comes out of us, what we do for the sake of, for example, survival, it's a very physical energy. So it is very connected to our physicality. For example, the root chakra. So, on one hand, this Mercury retrograde season will mean taking care of your physical body. So, for a lot of people, even medical visits or taking care of medical stuff for themselves. It's a physical and medical. Mercury will conjunct Chiron as well, 3 times. But also, I'll speak about this in just a little bit in greater detail. But Chiron, okay, we understand the psychological wound, spiritual wound, generational wound, collective wound, any type of wound. But it is also physical wound. Physical wounding, and wounding, it is where maybe it is not part of an aggression from another person or element towards us. It may be a part of our own negligence, ignorance, bad direction that we went physically, like diet or I don't know. But that's where we wounded ourselves, or we allowed ourselves to be wounded. So it is still very much a Chiron in Aries. We wounded the self. So for a lot of people, this self is their physical self. So they will need to take care of it, whatever their personal specifics are. So yes, I must say that for a lot of people, this will also play out in a medical way or physical way, or it doesn't necessarily have to be doctors, because you realize that I really need to change my diet, and you change your diet based on your own understanding and intuition and common sense. There it is. But the ruler of this Mercury retrograde, and also the ruler of um, where Chiron is Mars, because Mars is the ruling planet of Aries. It is in Pisces. And Pisces rules hospitals, medical institutions, prison, confinement, where you go to get well. So healers, healing. So even I know that Pisces is a very spiritual sign, but in this sense it rules even the non-spiritual, as in the, I'm not even sure how you say that word, allopathic or something like that, healing. So hospitals and yeah, you get what I mean. And speaking about Mars, well, Mercury retrograde is given the tone by what the ruler of the sign is doing when Mercury especially is in standing still, in standstill. Because every planet, when they are standing still, their symbolism is greatly amplified. That's when they get the momentum. So Mars is in Pisces. On one hand, this immediately means Mercury retrograde season, this one, will have a type of frustration to it. Why? Because Mars is imprisoned in Pisces. It cannot be its direct and quick self. It is absolutely wonderful for anything psychological. regardless of what you do with it. You know, for example, you need to empower Mars, fortify yourself psychologically. Very good for that. Any type of healing work, even self-healing, where you need to kind of do something psychological, keep up a mood or fight a mood, fight depression, for example. Or it is also equally good when you need to do to have an effect that's also psychological, because you need to have a certain kind of inner alchemy to convince a person, a negative effect, manipulate a person, lie to a person. Mars and Pisces, you find the psychological way. It is good for anything spiritual, anything. When we were speaking about healing as well, so alternative healing, self-healing through self-convincing. It is very, very powerful in that sense. So you can imagine that this Mercury retrograde will involve that you need to have a certain type of control over yourself and over your actions and over your inner world, Mars and Pisces. So imagine the discomfort where Mars cannot be all that super direct, which means it is controlled in a way, it is confined. But the action it has, or the effect it has to produce, has to be like almost as direct, almost as uh, an empowered Mars, a free Mars, because Aries needs to do it, the initiation. Let's do it. So, and the other thing, whenever we speak about retrograde, not just Mercury, any planet, what aspect the planet is holding when it's standing still, it is going to be like a ketone. Well, Mercury is not holding any big aspects when it stands still, but it does hold a semi-sextile with Neptune. That's that has frustration all over. Why? Well, Aries, very, very direct, very earthly. No, the first breath. That is where we cannot be spiritual yet or be connected to the spirit directly. We're just infants. We just woke up in matter in that sense. Neptune in the sign of Pisces, especially at the very end degrees, that is all spirit. The and even the others, Mercury rationale, Neptune cannot be even touched by rationale. Very different, so you can imagine the discomfort. Let me put it in context for you how it plays out, let's say collectively. Mercury and Aries, let's solve the wars one way or another. Let us solve the problem. But Neptune in the sign of Pisces, compassionately, idealistically, principalistically, there it is. It's hard for these two energies to be bedfellows, and they have to. Let me give you another example. Uh, this is where, speaking about conflict, the I don't want to get into the details because of obvious reasons why, but there was very recently a ruling of the International Courts of Justice. It solved something. You know what I mean? So there is a solution there. Is it legally binding? Or even if it is, what happens if someone doesn't respect it? One is Mercury and Aries, what happens? Then the other is Neptune. Well, still, if it says peace, peace exists. It exists in spirit, in principle. It definitely doesn't exist in fact, Aries. So you see these two energies. They drive each other insane because they are almost direct contradictions of each other. and still they operate simultaneously. For all of these reasons, this is not gonna be our typical Mercury retrograde season. So even though it can, how should I say, dig up the past like any Mercury retrograde. Okay, there's that energy. Redo, retake, rethink your projects, initiations, everything that's important to you. There's that. Because it's North Node Aries, you know what I mean? It's very important. This is not like the usual Aries energy which we have every single year, for example, when the sun is in Aries. The reason why it's not that, because that favors the new, the next, the again, Aries, something to meet the light of day for the first time, a new beginning, a new project, new initiative, new, okay, the energy is that. But that can be something very minor. But when there is a strong karmic force there, it almost like begs for an important, big, long-lasting beginning, you know, or put the beginning into your own special context. Breakthrough, a moment of courage. Let's do, regardless of what, it is still linked to your need, to your survival, to your sovereignty. You are. Therefore, you need your life to be like you. You know what I mean? Simultaneously, the ruler of Aries, along with other very important planets, are in Pisces, especially Saturn. Finality. In tarot, the world card, the finality is actually correspondent to Saturn in the sign of finalities. So there are big closures. At the same time, there are, the best word to use is crystallization. Things that we have been distilling, working upon, I don't, basically contemplating, integrating, alchemizing, dreaming up, trying to act, trying and trying and trying for the past, let's say, 4 to 5 years. Those were not in vain. It is almost like we were evaporating the Piscean water from the dream, allowing something to crystallize. Almost like when you evaporate seawater, you boil it down, for example, Mars, heat, or you leave it time to evaporate on its own Saturn, and there is the crystal, the salt crystallizes. That's how our dreams, our goals, our divine inspirations, our divine um, guidance, our spiritual journeys been playing out in these past, I don't even know, 5 to 6 or whatever years. Some of the journey seemed like a fool's errand, like it didn't make sense, it didn't lead anywhere, but we were just evaporating the illusion, the Piscean water, to get the salt, the crystal. This Mercury retrograde season will do exactly that. Will be a very powerful part of that. So after this long introduction, let us begin, because maybe as we go through the relevant dates, it's really not a big deal, because as I said, Mercury is not going to be holding any very big aspect except conjunctions with other power players. So it's almost like the mind is free to process and to react and to everything that it's meant to do. However, that also means it is free to be very aggressive and cruel, and there it is that we need to have a lot of control. Mars in Pisces is actually the saving grace in this sense. And okay, last but not least, this Mercury retrograde will include not just the total solar eclipse in Aries, but also the meeting of Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. So you can imagine how powerfully charged and changing this energy is, how unstable in a way, but exactly the chaos, the instability, the hurricane, the storm, the whatever, even in a mercurial way, mind storm, something blows your mind, something eclipses your mind, briefly, for example. How that actually is super positive because it will lead us to where we need to be. Or let me give you an example. There is a sea, underwater, undersea, submarine volcanic eruption. How dreadful! But that is exactly how a new island emerges. Give just maybe 100 years, that island is already full of life. You know what I mean? So, yes, let us begin. So, on the 1st of April, as I said, there is the semi-sextile between Mercury and Neptune. So, very uncomfortable. Not a very easy energy because of what I said earlier. Neptune, the spirit, the dream, but compassion, the principle, everything that is basically is also not real, can be real, but is also not real. You know what I mean? Then there is Mercury and Aries. Well, it has to be real in a way. Or the words Mercury, they have to do something. You know, this is where we cannot tell bedtime stories. We need to say powerful words, words of action, words of motivation, or words of confrontation, like it or not. So this is how we begin this Mercury retrograde season. Now, one of the relevant days as Mercury goes backwards, not in physical reality, of course, is actually the 8th of April. The 8th of April is the moment when we have the total solar eclipse in Aries. Now, I'm not going to speak about the eclipse, even though that is so important. But in this recording, Mercury has to be the star of the show. Mercury is going to be at 25 degrees of Aries, so pretty close to the eclipse, which is at 19 degrees, almost 20 degrees of Aries. So 5 degrees between them. For exactly this reason, expect Mercury. So again, mind, communication, words, mental perception, especially in Aries, physicalities, Aries, the root energy, instinct, impulse, the most primal part of ourselves, to the most complex, of course, Mercury. Why not? Mobile phone technology, everything that Mercury rules, to be part of fate at around this moment. Now, when I say part of fate, it can also play out in a rather unexpected way. This is because, on one hand, when the eclipse takes place, Venus is going to be already in the sign of Aries, principle of love. Okay, Venus is not all that much comfortable in this part of the sky because it's the opposite sign of the one she rules, Libra. However, her presence is still very important. So the love, attraction, etc., etc. Remember, physicality, principle. Then there is the eclipse fate. And then Mercury is conjunct at the moment of the eclipse with asteroid Amor. So, you know, in Italian and Latin languages, amore and stuff like that. Well, that is like, if I'm not mistaken, the Latin Cupid or Eros or something like that. So it is all about love, romance. It is especially because Venus is also in this part of the sky. So this might be a romantic partnership related energy to some people, for some people, a fated romance, but physical in a physical way, or a fated breakup because solar eclipse, as I said, something is eclipsed, but which is tied to a fated new beginning. Maybe the new beginning happens before the breakup, if you get my hint. So this can also have potentially a strong romantic or Venusian expression to it. And after all, the South Node is in Libra, so of course partnerships. Partnerships are not excluded, especially because Mercury opposes Libra. So it's very much connected, even though it's not connected to the South Node yet. So yes, the eclipse. Moving on, just one day, Mercury is conjunct and the moon as well. So a triple conjunction. Aries, so goddess of discord. Remember back on the 26th of March, what kind of happened? Maybe if it wasn't an event per se, what happened in your mind? What were you thinking? What were you planning? What were you processing, reacting to? Maybe that comes back. But anyway, it is a rebellious energy, an explosive energy, angry words, sovereignty, fight for the self. On the world stage, it is obvious that it is going to play out in every way, shape, and form where there can be a conflict of information or protest or rebellion. So, news about this hitting all of us, absolutely. But in our individual lives, there can be moments of surprises when something is said, something is written, why not? A message is sent and it changes the situation, especially with the moon. The moon means emotionally we react to it. Collectively, of course, it makes very much sense, but individually as well. Where is these last degrees, 24 degree of Aries, falling in your personal chart? So, yes, this is the second meeting with Aries. There is going to be a grand finale in May, but I'll get to that later on. Now, another relevant date. Let me put the chart back. Is actually the 10th. And it is not all that very much relevant due to Mercury himself, but Mercury is very close to the sun, illumination, clarity, but combustion. The sun is very comfortable, strong, loves being in a sign of Aries, very self-oriented. So Mercury is empowered, energized. Then the sign of Aries and everything in it. For example, Venus, North Node, Chiron, Sun, Mercury, then that asteroid that we spoke about, Amor. Then the sign of Aries is also host to dwarf planet Salasha, dwarf planet Menue, a binary dwarf planet system, which has a very complicated name. It's basically that dwarf planet rules rejection or distancing, withdrawal. You know, like the Eight of Cups tarot card, leaving the world behind, withdrawing to something. And its name is, it begins with a B. But I'm so sorry. I haven't written it down. So, and then there are so very many other Atrophos, for example. Asteroid Atrophos is also in the sign of Aries. So Aries is host to a number of different objects, and the ruler is conjunct Saturn. The two malefics, according to the ancients, Saturn and Mars were two planets which were not so nice, malefics. So Saturn was the great malefic, temptation, challenges, karmic elements which make our lives hard, obstacles. Mars is, war, aggression. Of course, it is the malefic. And they meet in a fellow malefic sign of Pisces. This is where, not in modern astrology, but according to the ancients, Pisces was one of the darker energy signs, along with Scorpio, of course, and Virgo. So times can be scary, collectively speaking, at that moment. Because what and however it plays out, and it does play out, because Mars is the activator, Saturn is the manifestation principle, will, but especially spiritual will, psychological will, collective will is enabled. So there is going to be a dark side to this, which is not going to be nice. And I'm very sure that certain people will draw the conclusions that this was written in and this holy text, that holy text, oh, it's the end of times because the signs are there. It may appear so. But this is just one part, one side of this coin. There is the other side. Because we must not forget that the ruler of Pisces is at home, Neptune. And of course, that also adds to the dark side, let's say to the scary side. Because yes, the illusion, the lie, the deception, Neptune's dark side. The antichrist spirit, why not? Manifests in a certain way, Saturn, Mars. But the other side of the coin, the Christ consciousness, mercy, compassion, strong morality, Pisces and Saturn. Saturn, the restrictive principle, let's make it real. Let's not, for example, we want to do something compassionate, and let's put it into collective context. Let it not be just a principle or thought or feeling. Let's make it real. If we want to help, let's help. So you can imagine this is also really, really positive. It will have but the ruler Mars of Aries. So Mars is in this very, very powerful, potent, and karmic conjunction with Saturn. So you can imagine this will influence every single planet and energy in Aries. It will add the Saturnian seriousness, intensity. So whatever initiation or whatever, however this energy plays out in our lives, both individually and collectively, it does something for the long term. Either we fight symbolically, for a powerful closure, or to complete something, to stabilize something, to begin anew or end, it doesn't even matter, because it is life changing and ultimately it's a big need. Yes, so there is that side of this energy. Moving on to the 12th, we have Mercury meeting with the Sun, a powerful moment of clarity under this larger Mercury retrograde season in Aries. Something is crystal clear. We have enough, well, to be totally honest with you, fire and impulse within ourselves. I wanted to say motivation, but this is not the wisdom-based motivation. This is strong, strong fire or initiative, drive. This is very instinctual, physical, very root chakra-ish, but it gets something is initiated, signed, or said, or under this combustion. It's clear. It is basically clear. That's what I want to say. Let's not forget Mars is still very much conjunct Saturn, so it's serious. The karmic intent, whatever we say, do, express Aries, it has a very powerful and long-term effect. Mars conjunct Saturn, even karmically. So yes, and then let us move to the 16th. The 16th is really important because this is when Mercury conjuncts Chiron for the second time. Mercury conjuncted Chiron on the 20th of March, so for the first time, 2024. That set a tone. Maybe that was the moment when we, collectively speaking, just look back at what happened on the 20th of March. And it has to do with wounding, understanding the problem. Yes. But individually speaking, what came to our understanding, as in, and it has to do with wounding. Wounding where we might have been carrying an old wound within us, an I am wound, Aries, or a fresh wounding a few years ago, or something wounded, the I am, and we are now looking at that from a different light, different understanding, ready to heal or do something. Now, on this date, on the 16th of April, maybe a new layer adds to that. Either we understand our wounds in such a way where the understanding immediately gives us power to do something, Aries, or there is something that comes along with the healing process. So we get empowered. And Mercury will meet Chiron for the third and final time, but going direct this time and at a different degree, 20 degree. The second time it meets at 19 degree. And so on the 6th of May, and it also meets the moon. So it's a triple conjunction. That might be a very important chemo, and the moon, emotion, a very important wounding, a very important moment when we really make a progress with that healing journey. But you can imagine this will play out collectively as well. So let us hope for the best. Let us hope that there is healing enabled by this Mercury. And actually, Mercury is that planet which has to do with the healing process in any way, shape, and form. The Caduceus energy. Or in Hermetism, the healing energy of Hermes, or the alchemy of healing, or Archangel Raphael. That is very much mercurial energy. So Mercury, or if we put it in modern context, the know-how, the science behind healing, the research behind healing, Mercury. So it is a very powerful healing energy. So I really hope that this plays out on the world stage, where the wounded and the vulnerable and all that are receiving help. But this is also relevant in a very much, much, much bigger context, where new healing technology, healing techniques, healing methods, those which were in beta, let's say, stages in the past couple of years, especially when Mercury was in the sign of Pisces. Now they are launched. They are ready to take their place. They step into the present. They're no longer an ideal of the future. They step into existence. So technologically or in any other way, even alternative, spiritual, any kind, when it comes to healing, and especially, I repeat, the modus operandi, the specifics, the details, how we do it, we may see big launches in the sense that it appears in a functional, ready way for the first time. So techniques in any shape and form, spiritual, holistic, classical, hyper scientific, hyper modern, whatever, like for example, quantum healing, this is when it becomes all that much applicable. For example, when a software is launched, we can expect that it's still full of errors and there is a lot of improvement, but it's already function. It's not no longer beta. So this is how we can, very important in this sense, and even personal healing and even collective healing. But this is also the fated wounds, because that is also Chiron. When a wounding that you receive leads you into a fated direction, for example, to a fated healer, to a fated withdrawal, to a fated direction you take in life, where the wound will no longer matter because it will connect you to something destined and fated. That may very well be part of the game. But again, 6th of May is more relevant in that sense because that's the third meeting. Moving forward to the 19th, this is when Mercury meets Venus at 17 degree of Aries. So again, financially, sensually, romantically, etc. in Venusian matters, this may be very, very important because, you know, communication, connection, words, sexy words, seductive words, it may be quite a relevant energy. And both these planets are very close to the North Node. So again, progress, to do, initiation, coming out of the closet energy, but not in it in any way. For example, something was for a number of years a hobby. Now you decide, I'm coming out of the closet. I'm showing the world. Or you put something into the 10th house, astrologically speaking, you're coming out that, look, world, I can do this. For example, but in any way, shape, and form coming out. And North Node agreeing to something. And something that I forgot to mention with the Chiron, they're very close to Chiron, so it's very much, actually the Mercury-Venus conjunction is sandwiched between Chiron and Venus. Sorry, between Chiron and the North Node. So very healing themed as well. Sensual healing, sexual healing, physical healing, but in that sense, for some people get back their mojo, their drive, their masculinity, their femininity. They get online. And also what is very, very important, Mars, again, the ruler of Aries, is sextiling. A conversation of harmony, very action oriented, very sparky with Jupiter and Uranus. Now, this configuration, not just Mercury, but everything has manifestation written all over it. The moon in a few hours here will trine this conjunction in Virgo. the moon feelings, or our inner world, our inner state, understands something, Virgo, or something purifies. So this is a very, very powerful manifestation energy. So Mars in Pisces, our psychological, spiritual, inner creational focus, our inner masculinity. It doesn't matter what gender we are, everyone has masculine energy. Focusing it and going with the flow, because Uranus will require us to go with the flow. And Mercury conjunct Venus, attraction principle, something, we attract something in our lives, or something manifests, or this is a, but as wonderful and magical, as useful as all of this is, let us not forget that it is Jupiter and Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Around, even if we meet the love of, let's say, an example, the big love of the big one, you know, that person who you always dreamed of, or you realize that you met, you know, the realization. The world around us is in chaos. How? Well, either financially, Taurus, banks, banking system, or physically, earthquake, volcano, because of this Pisces energy, sea quake, tsunamis, war at sea, maritime warfare. It can, Mars in Pisces, amongst many other things, is also that. And it is very close to a fixed star. I'm not gonna look it up right now. I just know that it's there, which rules exactly that: shipwrecks, problems at sea, etc., etc. So there's gonna be a lot of turmoil and chaos and conflict. So you know what I mean. It's still chaos, but it will have a really, really good side to this. But let's just say, replace the romantic context with money, financially, business, investment. You do something, you make a big step, you take a leap of faith. But there is a one-on-one alliance here, or something that has to do with alliances. Because whenever we take into consideration the North Node, we cannot ignore the South Node opposing it. So we can very well say that Mercury Venus also oppose the South Node. So what do we do differently on the wisdom that the South Node and Libra showed us until now? How are we making new relationships based on new patterns, new value systems, etc.? Because this is the last moment when this South Node is still on via combusta, the path of fire, that where relationships are hot and burning, leaving the South Node, leaving that. Thank God for that. But karmically speaking, these are the last intense moments when relationships, even on the world stage diplomatically, are literally on fire. On the 20th, well, it's not Mercury who's the star of the show, but rather the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction. And it's obvious why it's important. But again, we must not understand the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction as the 20th of April. It's already online, even as you listen to this. But this is just the moment of intensity. You know what I mean? So all of the Mercury retrograde period actually takes place under the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but this might be a very intense moment. That's why I'm highlighting this 20th of April. Okay. So moving on, the 25th of April is very important because Mercury conjuncts the North Node, which means it opposes the South Node. Remember that it conjuncted the first time on the 18th of March. So this is when our big musts towards ourselves, our projects, plans, sense how our sense of sovereignty acts out. So the big initiation energy, the big goals, the big dreams, the big leap of, actually quantum leap energy that we are trying and have been trying. That's a very important moment when it again reaches our understanding, and it really sinks into our conscious when the plan is refined, when we understand what it is that we need to do in many ways. And this, at this date, Mercury is at a standstill. So again, that's why, it actually goes direct on the North Node. So how it's almost like the universe would take a marker pen and highlight this, because it actually stops on the node. Because it conjuncts it 3 times, but really 2 times, because it goes direct sitting on the node. So that's where the universe emphasizes. It's almost like it's telling you, you almost reached the finish line with that dream of yours, goal of yours, whatever you're fighting for, whatever is very important in your life, and not just something that started even before May last year, actually. So 2021, 2022, 2023, up until this moment, what has been building in your life? Because this Mercury retrograde kind of highlights that, and it urges us to get the plan together, or for us to acknowledge, to be in a state of readiness, because we have to take important steps in the very close future. So yes, and then all throughout May, Mercury will leave its shadow. So again, that's when things will truly settle down, as you can see. And then around the 16th of May, Mercury finally leaves Aries and enters into the sign of Taurus. And that's like a truly fresh and new ground for this Mercury this year. So this concludes this Mercury retrograde special horoscope. I really hope that you liked it and you found it useful, and that I haven't bored you to death. Thank you so much for all the love and support. And until next time, bye for now.